Welcome to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Jim Orr. Jim, welcome to State of Mind Studios. How are you?
Hi Paul, thanks for inviting me to your podcast.
It's great. This is your fourth appearance, isn't it?
Is it?
Aye, it's your fourth appearance, Jim. The last time we spoke to you was all around the Bend at Like Bratback shows. You then joined us at Cathkin Park for a wee update. We'll be talking about your next project, which is in the works as we speak. We'll be talking about that as well, and we'll have a look back to the season so far, the Celtic season so far, and your thoughts on that. You've been a long time Celtic supporter. How far back does your Celtic supporting life go? When was your first game?
I think I said to you first time I was on, I was somebody who would much rather play football. I tend to play football up until my mid-teens, so it was kind of late 70s. The Alfie Conn era, that's when I started going.
The Alfie Conn era. He was a controversial signing, wasn't he?
And even then, I would tend to go in midweek games because I was playing football on a Saturday. I got to the point maybe 21, 22 when I stopped playing football altogether. And the old man used to always say, if you can play football, play football. You've got plenty of time to watch football. So I think from 78, 79, 80, 10 men won the league. I think from then on, that's when I started kind of going a lot more consistently. From that year onwards.
10 men winning the league to going for 10 in a row. You've seen it all, really. But I remember you and I were exchanging emails back and forwards for a spell, and I was looking at your name, Jim, and I was wondering, is it the same Jim Orr? Is it the same Jim Orr who was involved in Save Our Celts? And that's how you and I kind of got to know each other. You came in to the toll booth in Stirling and we spoke about the Celtic takeover back in the 1990s. So it seems like a long time ago, almost 30 years ago now.
Yeah, 4 years to the 30th anniversary of Fergus coming along and saving the club. Things have moved on quite a bit since then. I mean, we could never imagine back then when Rangers went for 9 in a row that we would suddenly be going for 9 in a row and now 10. So this is the season.
I know, this is the season now. The thing is as well, we were talking this morning before coming on, Jim, about the current situation at Celtic. Don't want to labour COVID every single day. We all hear enough of it. We see enough of it on social media. But obviously it is affecting Celtic players at the moment. And I was asking you, Scotland have qualified. We've got through slimly.
No, yeah.
Penalty shootout. Well, they've qualified for the next game. We've got another game. Game. We're through. Is it not about time the Celtic players just came back? Are they really needed? But there'll be things preventing Celtic from pulling them back. Unfortunately, it's a FIFA issue. We've got 2 guys already on international duty who are isolating, in Edouard and Christie. We've got loads of other players out there, and I'm less concerned about injuries. I'm more concerned about more of them testing positive. Is there anything that can be done by the clubs?
I think these are obviously exceptional times. And I was saying to you earlier, the thing about the football these days, there's a bit of it that you can have some element of, you know what you're doing, you can control this, but anything to do with COVID, you can't control it at all, and things are changing day by day. And I think UEFA should be looking at maybe making some exceptions for things. I think if you put your player forward in all good faith, and then they're having to self-isolate and miss games, there should be some mechanism by which you can then say we can maybe not have to play certain games because through no fault of our own. If a player gets injured, then fair enough, that's just part and parcel of it. I think it's difficult because Scotland are playing 3 games in about, 6 days?
Yeah.
Something like that. Mm-hmm. The one last night, that's a Euro 2021 qualifier. Good game, important game, we've got through that, and that's great. The next 2 games, the Nations League is a bit Mickey Mouse. I think that should have been cancelled this year. Mm-hmm. And I think it'd be a disaster if we end up losing any of the players for the next game because of this Mickey Mouse tournament. And if we do lose players, I think there should have been some mechanism by which we could say, well, through no fault of our own, we've lost a couple of players for a major game, we're allowed to not have to play that game, we can postpone that game. Something like that should be in place. I mean, the thing that annoys me about this season, this should have been the big season. I mean, I think since we got 5, 6 in a row, it was always wait to the 10 in a row season.
Yeah.
And last year was manic, and the whole 9 in a row thing. But it was good fun, dead exciting. And it's a shame it ended the way it ended, but it was great. And you think, right, on to the 10. And the fact you can't actually go and watch the games. And this would be mental at the games, because last season, managed to sell out all the season tickets. You couldn't get a ticket for games because I've got a few friends who don't have season tickets. Couldn't get them tickets for the games, and every game, every point's a prisoner. You had to win the games. Dead exciting. then you think, we'll just wait till the 10 season, this will be brilliant. And it's kind of football, but not as we know it. And I find the whole closed door thing hard to get my head around, because it just seems like you go over the park watching a bunch of amateur teams playing. There's no atmosphere, there's kind of nothing. And it must be hard for the players.
I think so.
Try and lift themselves.
I think so, particularly for a team like Celtic, where the support is obviously world renowned for being influential, not only for your own players but for the opposition. But I think when you're watching that, one or two things that I have picked up on is Duffy, and because you can hear players talking and shouting, and I've spoken about his influence over Chris Ayer, who's a player that I think great. I really admire Chris Ayer, Jim, but I do think that Duffy's very influential on Ayer, and he's playing more like a centre half rather than a rampaging midfielder. And I said that yesterday to Stevie Millen. We've seen a lot less of his long bursting runs through the midfield, even though he was involved in the all-important opening goal against St Johnstone. Now, the tension in this room is bad enough. Imagine being at the game, as you say, going for the 10. When you think back to those dark days, late 80s, early 90s, where you were looking at Celtic accounts and you were thinking something needs to be done here, did you ever think the day would come that you'd be sitting here talking about 10 in a row?
I think nobody could envisage what's actually happening just now. I think getting back to the COVID thing, I think my big concern is a kind of lack of clarity as to what happens next. And if we're depending on the SPFL board or the SFA, that's my big concern, because I think they showed last year on how they dealt with the vote that that they're shambolic, and the SFA are shambolic. And beforehand we were kind of chatting about, and I was making the point about, we look at who's in charge of the SFA. The person who's in charge of the SFA should be a kind of experienced businessman, mover and shaker, moves and shakes. Being in charge of a major business, knows what they're doing. We've got the guy who used to be the managing director of Partick Thistle. And that's no disrespect to the guy, but we've got a system in place that lets the managing director of Partick Thistle be the most important person in Scottish football. Yeah. And then we've got a situation where, back onto COVID there, we're going to lose Ryan Christie for this game next week through no fault of his own. So something's went wrong somewhere. And I know we're in a bit of a blame culture, but we're looking to say, well, whose actually fault was this? Because we've given one of our, in my opinion, one of our best players to the national team. He doesn't have COVID, but he has to self-isolate. So if you're Neil Lennon, you'd be absolutely furious about this. Absolutely. So we have to understand what's happened so it doesn't happen again. But we also need to understand, I'd be astonished if we get through this season. I'd be astonished if we play 38 league games, finish last year's cup, finish this year's cup, finish this year's League Cup, all the Europa League games, and all these international games. I don't think we'll finish this season. So if we don't finish it, what happens next? And nobody's told me, unless I missed a meeting, nobody's told me what happens next.
You missed the memo, Jim. Because
I can't be the only paranoid Celtic fans. I'm paranoid, and we've good right to be paranoid. I'm actually not paranoid enough at times, given what's happened over the last 20 years or so. But my point being that I can't be the only paranoid Celtic fan when we dropped the points at Kilmarnock. And last season's big thing was the points per game. And you're thinking, hold on, what's our points per game? Oh, it's less than the bad guys. What if they call the league after 3 games? Nah, they wouldn't call it after 3 games, but they might. You never know. Because
it's Scottish football.
Because it's Scottish football, and we don't know what's happening. So somebody has to tell me, and the reason they have to tell me is because I've paid out 600 quid on a season ticket. I hope my wife's not listening to this. I've paid out 600 quid on a season ticket, and I've got Sky, and I've got BT, and I've got Premier, and I've done pay-per-view at Ross County, and I've done pay. So I'm pouring all this money, as are you, Paul, and 50,000 other Celtic fans, and the 40,000 of the bad guys are putting money in. Hibs and Aberdeen, all these guys are throwing all this money in, and we don't know what's going to happen next. And I think, personal opinion, again, we'd have to play a significant amount of games for it to be not to be called null and void. And part of me thinks maybe they should just call it null and void, because hopefully we're back to normal next season, and that's the 10th season. And maybe that's the time we get to go to the games, because that's the thing we're all missing. Because it's a hard enough time as it is, but if people had the games to look forward to, at least, and I don't go to the away games, but I've now started, maybe about a couple of years ago, my kind of Saturday ritual is I go to Malone's pub for the Celtic AM.
I've seen you there a few times, Jim.
For anyone who doesn't know about Celtic AM, fantastic thing in Malone's pub in Suckyhall Lane, where a lovely guy called Andrew Millen runs, there's a 2-hour session before every home game, and Andrew's there, and he'll interview maybe 3 or 4 people who are I've got Celtic leanings. It could be an ex-player, people like Simon Donnelly. I've been there, Bobby Petta, John Fallon, Frank McAvenny, Frank McGarvey have been there, Paul John Dykes has been there, I've been there.
They were scraping the barrel that week, Jim.
So Big Andrew will interview 3 or 4 people, and then there's some music. A guy called Danny Kelly will play kind of Celtic songs. You get a free bacon roll. So I've started going there, and I've started cadging a lift on the McConnell's supporters bus at the top of Hope Street. So, and I use my bus pass, because I got my bus pass last year to get into. So that's my Saturday ritual. And that's been taken away. So it's disappointing not to have that. Never mind the games. The fact that you've got ritual. And I don't go to away games. I can only imagine that the guys that are going up to Ross County and Aberdeen and stuff like that have been doing this for years. And not to be able to do that, obviously there's more important things in life in football. But it's a
social aspect as well, Jim.
That's the highlight of the week.
Absolutely.
And like I said, the game last Sunday, it'd have been brilliant to have been there, scoring the goals right at the death and coming back up the road. It'd have been brilliant. So we're all missing that this year, and hopefully we get some sort of vaccine to get us back to some sort of normality as soon as possible.
Yeah, absolutely, Jim. And again, just a big shout out to Billy Stark as well, former Celtic Billy Stark, one of the nicest fellas I've ever met in the world of football, Jim, over the years. And he's also tested positive for COVID-19, so hopefully he's safe and well when he gets over that, because I'm thinking back to the centenary season now, and I think it was 60 grand we paid for Billy Stark, and he was one of the best players that season. He was brilliant.
Pound for pound, he was a fantastic signing.
Excellent. Uncapped as well. Never capped for Scotland, was he, Billy Stark?
I don't think so.
No, and we're talking about Scotland because I'm being selfish. I'm just looking at the situation where, Scotland have got through to this playoff. It's happening in November. Is it not about time that the club were able somehow, and I know there would be regulations preventing us from doing so. What if we lose another 3-4 players? Ryan Christie's, apparently playing games with Stuart Armstrong and Kieran Tierney. So Tierney and Christie are now having to self-isolate. My biggest concern about that also, the wider concern is Christie is buddies, or he's associating quite closely with the 2 guys who are down in England making the big bucks down in England, the 2 former Celtic teammates. That definitely rubs off on players playing in Scotland, Jim. We've seen it with Lou Macari in Scotland get-togethers, and Ryan Christie seems destined to move down there and follow his 2 mates.
I think at times as football fans, I think we're a wee bit naive that we think people want to play for the jersey and all that kind of. At the end of the day, it's a job. It's a job of work. We were chatting beforehand about, I was making the point that people are saying things like, well, it'd be good if we played in England. And I was saying, just be careful what you wish for, because I'd find it difficult if we were down in England and we became like an Arsenal, say, and we're paying players £200,000 a week, or 200. Mesut Ozil's one apparently £350,000 a week. And given kind of like where Celtic have came from, how the club was founded, etc., if you're a Celtic fan, would you be comfortable with paying a player £200,000 a week? I wouldn't be. And I don't know how much the players are on, and you hear stories about how much players are on, but for the sake of argument, say Scott Brown's on 25 grand a week, I'm kind of comfortable with that. The 25 grand, my understanding is maybe roughly the average annual wage. So Scott Brown earns in a week what the average person earns in a year. Are you comfortable with that, Jim? Aye. What if we paid Scott Brown 100 grand a week? I'm not so comfortable with that. So I think you have to look at those kind of things, and the whole actual how the club's wage structure works. Not just Celtic, how the whole thing works. How much do you pay people? I find that fascinating as an ex-accountant in terms of how do you balance the books. And we've just closed the transfer window there. And you go on social media, and social media is mental most of the time. And we need to buy him, We can't buy all these players. We're in the middle of a pandemic. And I was astonished that we kept the players that we kept, and we bought the players that we bought. Because, and on to things that you have no control over, like the media. And the media were telling us Eddie's off to Villa, Ayer's off to AC Milan, Cham's off to West Ham, Christie's off to Burnley, Calmack's off to Leicester, and none of that happened. And the point you make there, that I'm sure that a player like Callum McGregor, who's a brilliant player, you forget how good he is because he's brilliant all the time.
Yeah, so consistent.
Every game, and he could easily play in that English Premier League, no bother for if it's Leicester or someone else. And so how much Callum McGregor on? I have no idea. But I'd imagine it's less than Scott Brown, and let's, for the sake of discussion, call it 20 grand a week. Am I comfortable with that? Absolutely. But if I'm Callum McGregor and I'm mixing with the Scotland squad and somebody like Ollie McBurney, who I'm not a big fan of, so I'd imagine Ollie McBurney's on a lot more than, say, 20 grand a week. So of course you'd be tempted because it's a job at the end of the day. And I don't care. I mean, you could be the most die-hard Celtic man, and we lost a very, die-hard Celtic man in Kieran Tierney. But if you're offered, 4, 5, 6, 7 times your salary and playing in that league, you're going to go. Absolutely, you're going to go. And that's the thing. Another thing we mentioned earlier, and the thing that I'm not a big fan of English football just now. But back in the day, and I'm going to sound like one of these kind of Celtic dads, as they call them on Twitter, I loved English football back in the day, back in the 60s and 70s, because of the sheer range and number of clubs that they had. And it was really, really competitive. And I loved Scottish football back in the day when it was really, really competitive. Back in the 60s, we touched on Like Bertie, which is my new play, which is about the 1965 season when we won the Scottish Cup. And we do the research for that, and you look at some of the crowds teams are getting. The Celtic were relatively small beer. During that season, we were getting 10,000, 12,000. Hibs were getting 30,000. But it was really, really competitive. Hearts were good. Kilmarnock were good. We had some competition there. But now we tend not to have a lot of competition. But I think, what was the question? Something with COVID, is it?
Well, yeah, but what we started speaking about
the point I was going to make,
was Christie, English football, Celtic becoming part of that.
Well, there's also the fact the point you were making is about could we do something about the international team? And Christie mixing. I think again it's about lack of clarity and all this stuff, and I do accept the fact that things are changing day by day. And if this is a UEFA sanctioned tournament and you're meant to release players, then they should be saying something like, if one of your players catches us because of what we're asking you to do, then your club should not be punished. And therefore, if you've got a game coming up and this player misses that, you can cancel that game, you can postpone that game. That's the rule. If they say something like that, then that's okay. We don't mind, because we're going to lose Eddie, or potentially lose Eddie for the next game against the bad guys, and we could lose Christie. We think we're definitely going to lose Christie through no fault of our own. And the fact that we've actually given players to the international team, that's unfair. If they get injured, fair enough. That comes with the territory. So that shouldn't be allowed to happen, and that will get worse. So I think UEFA, like the SFA, like the SPFL, should come out and say, if this happens, this is what happens next. So we understand, so there's some clarity. And then getting back to the thing I said earlier about when do you call the league? When do you call the league? If we called the league with less than 50% of the games played, I think it'd be hard to award that league on a points per game, whatever you want to do, type of thing. But I think we should know that now. Somebody should tell us that now.
This is the point. Absolutely, you should know what to expect should this eventuality occur. But one thing I would like to pick your brain about, and we've spoken quite a bit on the podcast previously, and just when we're chewing the fat, Jim, is back in the day and the way things went financially with Celtic. You had a specific interest in the financial element of that, being an accountant, and you were looking at the old accounts back then. When you look at Scottish football just now, Celtic being a prime example of a business that relies heavily on money through the turnstiles, but also the average revenue per fan within the stadium on match day and all the other revenue that generates. And we're looking, we're actually looking now at a situation whereby I don't expect to be back in a football stadium this season. Yeah. I think everybody's starting to become resigned to that fact, Jim. What do you think the Scottish game is going to look like once we get back to the point where fans can get back? Do you think there will be casualties? Do you think some of the casualties will be high profile? And if so, that then goes back to one of your previous points, Celtic then might have to look elsewhere?
I think there's a number of things, and I think this pandemic will maybe lead to a few things. We've got too many teams in Scotland, too many top level teams in Scotland. If you compare yourself with England, they've got 90 teams with a population of 50 million, and we've got 40 odd teams with a population of 5. So if you do the comparison there, if we were the same as England, we should have 9 teams. Not 9 teams in the top league, 9 teams in total. That's it. And that's a bit low. And I'd always felt maybe 16 would do it. One league of 16, but the teams are teams. They're not like part-timers. And then the rest of Scottish football, that becomes semi-professional, regionalised, whatever it's going to be. Then the other thing that comes up from time to time is actually clubs looking to merge, and that's a whole kind of hot potato with all the teams. I know you come from Fife, and when you look at Fife and you look at the teams like Dunfermline and Cowdenbeath and East Fife and Raith Rovers, you know, if they merge to become, you know, Fife United, for want of a better word, they could be a power. They could do something. They wouldn't compete at the kind of Celtic level, but they compete with Hibs and Aberdeen and these teams, but they're not going to merge. You're not going to convince a Raith Rovers fan or the Dunfermline fan to merge together. But maybe some sort of new team has to be formed, and maybe it takes a generation for this new Fife United or Fife City to actually make some progress, get some fun. But it's just really, really difficult. Well, such a difference. I mean, Celtic are, you know, no matter what metric that you use, they're by far and away the biggest team in the country.
Yeah.
By a factor of quite a lot, and then the bad guys are kind of second, and then Hibs, Aberdeen, etc. So from we're playing teams like last week we played St Johnstone, you know, we should be beating St Johnstone because, you know, we were so much bigger. But you don't play football on metrics. You play football in the park, and that's why it's dead exciting. But we should be putting teams like that away. But sorry, I'm a bit kind of disjointed in terms of what we're talking about. But I think there's far too many teams, and maybe this pandemic might lead to some teams not being there, which would be really, really sad given the history of some of the teams. But everything boils down to money, and you have to balance the books at the end of the day. And that's the thing about Celtic. I mean, I'm saying again, I'm astonished and really pleased at what's actually happened over that transfer window. Can't believe what's happened. Can't believe how much we've spent on players, and they'll be costing a lot of money. You're not going to come up from the English Premiership.
Exactly.
Shane Duffy did, and Albi, as they call him, Albi Ayeti did, and then we've got the man from AC Milan, you're coming from Serie A. So we must be paying these guys a lot of money at a time, as you say, Paul, there's no fans in the ground. And the money we would have made, I mean, we get a fantastic draw in the Europa. And again, we'd be going to see them playing AC Milan in a couple of weeks' time. How good would that be? And the guys who go abroad, you know, we're going to take 10, 12,000 people to the San Siro. And we'd have made easily, what, 4, 5, 6 million?
Yeah, absolutely.
Out of Europe. So we're not going to get that 4, 5, 6 million pound. I think we've been fortunate, or we've been clever, however it's been that we've managed to salt away quite a few bob. That's not the case with other teams. So goodness knows how they're managing to balance the books without having to go to the government and trying to be bailed out. And then you compare and contrast that to what's happening in England, where you mentioned the other day in the transfer window, what was it you said? Was it £1 billion?
It was just it was shocking amounts of money.
And that's why, and maybe it's just been older. I think, you know, money tends to kind of not make things better, tends to make things worse. And that's why I'm not a big fan of English football, because there's too much money sloshing about. Up here, we need money to pay the players. So in terms of what happens to all these teams, I don't know. I think a lot of the times maybe they don't have a lot of overheads possibly. Maybe don't pay the players that much. So I occasionally go and watch Pollock Juniors, and you speak to the guys who go and watch Pollock Juniors, and they'll tell me that the Pollock Juniors, or the players in the junior game, are actually likely paid more than the kind of bottom third and fourth team in Scotland. You know, I don't think they're paid a lot as well. You know, again, I've got no idea. I'm guessing 50 quid a week or something like that. You know, so maybe they're not paying out that much, and so maybe they've been given some financial help. So I think teams like maybe the Aberdeens and the Hibs and the Hearts of this world, they're the ones that I'd be a bit concerned about. And the thing, just I mentioned Hearts there, I would have kept Hearts in the league. I would have, because this is an exceptional circumstance. I would have done something to have kept them there. They're a big club. Imagine being a Hearts fan just now. You know, you've no football virtually. You know, you're in the second tier now. You've got a Scottish Cup semi-final coming up. You've hardly kicked a ball. You're losing your players. So I thought that was unfair. In my opinion, I thought there should have been a way of just keeping them up. Inverness as well, if you want. Have a bigger league. They could have had a league of 14, play each other twice, 20 games, have the split, 6 games each, 36 games. You know, and it's not as if I think the big thing with the smaller clubs is wanting to have the two big Glasgow clubs come to town and you make your money there through the crowd, but there's no crowds. So it didn't matter this year.
No.
So there's no point. Plus, it's always good to watch a game at Tynecastle. You know,
it is. I think also when you look at the pyramid system that was in place, Jim, and the furore over Brecon City avoiding relegation, and Brora Rangers, Celtic Hearts not having the opportunity to rise up that ladder. So it was controversial, but it goes back to the point you made there, where the highest echelons of Scottish football, when you look at them and the decisions that are made, that does concern me. It concerns me as we move ahead in this season, due to the fact that we are moving into the unknown week to week. We're seeing every day new cases cropping up with footballers. At what point are you able? I mean, you mentioned there about games being postponed. At what point would that happen? I read a few weeks ago there that if you've got 13, fit players and one of them's a goalkeeper, you must play the game. Is that the case? I mean, it means you've only got 2 subs on the bench. Do you then have to fill the bench with 17-year-old kids who are nowhere near the first team? I just think somebody has to tell us what's happening. And these guys are paid a lot of money. Your Neil Doncasters and your Ian Maxwell's. I mean, is Ian Maxwell on something like $300,000 a year, something like £300,000? It's ridiculous. And what we're looking for is, nobody knows what's going to happen, but let's plan. Let's have some scenario planning. If this happens, we do this. If this happens, we do that. And then we know what's happening, because, as I said earlier, I don't think this season will finish. And I'd like somebody just to tell me that, in my opinion, I think if we play 75% of the games, that's enough games to justify whoever's won the league. If you're going to do it on a points per game basis, then that's fine. So 38 games of the season, 75% must be running about 28, 29 games or something like that. So if some team has played 29 games and we have to call the season because the pandemic's got worse, we do points per game, and everyone's signed up to that, or they vote for it. But they do that now. They don't do that 2 days or just after it's happened, because that's too late. And then you have the clarity. And as I said, because I'm a paranoid Celtic fan, you're looking at points per game. And then when we got to the bit that we had the best points per game, you're thinking, call the league. Get it finished now, because that's 10, because we've done points per game. It might have only played 9 games, it doesn't matter. Call it now. And that's paranoid Celtic fan, you should wear that as a badge of honour. That's not a bad thing. We've spoken a wee bit about Ryan Christie. There's loads of comments come through, Jim, when we're on a Celtic State of Mind's bulletin, and they're coming in from Twitter, Facebook and YouTube. So thank you everybody for getting involved. We'll go over to the people, the Celtic fans out there who may be isolating, they might be at their work, but certainly what they need is a Celtic fix, and that's what hopefully we provide on a daily basis. Now, Patrick Murphy is getting in touch via YouTube. Welcome to the show, Patrick. Hope the boys are doing well, first and foremost. Well, of course, that's so important to mention that, Jim. These guys, they've got COVID, they've been tested positive, but I mean, this is an unpredictable virus. So obviously, Billy Stark, Odson, Edouard, Ryan Christie, we hope they all get through this without any real adverse effects. It's also the thing, I just put in there, that nobody knows how COVID works. There's this common perception that if you get it a couple of weeks, they're better. But I personally know people who've had it for 6 months and they don't get any better, and every day is really difficult for them. So who knows how Eddie is feeling, or Ryan Christie. Well, Ryan Christie doesn't have it, but Eddie has it. So who knows what impact it's going to have on him. It's a good shout. I think it could last 2 days, it could last 2 months. Ibrahimovic, he's tested positive 2 weeks running. So, that's the thing as well. You just think, you test positive, 14 days later, you're in the squad, we play Rangers, everything's fine. It might not work like that, it might not happen that way. So, absolutely, great point. That's what I was saying earlier about, how do you say his name again? Laxalt. Laxalt signs on Monday, and you go on social media, get him in for the Rangers, get him in. I mean, we've no idea. I mean, we think we know about football, but we don't really. I mean, I've played football since I was a kid, and you watch football all your life, and you think you know about it, but compared to somebody like Neil Lennon, take what I know and multiply it by a big number, and that's what Lenny knows. So, do you throw the guy in? Think of all the factors involved in that. Does he speak English? Is his English any good? Is he married? Does he get kids? Does he get a girlfriend? Where's he staying? How does it work? So there's so many factors with this kind of stuff. And then you've got the COVID that sits atop the whole thing, and the concern and all the things you have to go through. So No, you're right. But as football fans, generally, we just, we go, it's black and white, and we don't think about the personal scenario of moving country and probably with wife and kids back home. Is he ready? Is he actually mentally ready for a game?
The thing is, if you're a loan player, in terms of the money side of things, well, who actually pays you your wages and when do you get them? Has he got his wages like for last week, for last month? These are the things that must be, because at the end of the day, players are just ordinary guys doing an extraordinary job, so we can never kind of get inside our heads in terms of all the things they must be thinking. So mentally, physically, only Lenny would know that, whether he was ready for the game a week on Saturday. So we'll see what happens.
Well, Patrick goes on to say regarding the game, we know what game you're referring to there, Patrick. Christie wouldn't have been a starter for me if Edouard is well and can get back. I'd start him. This match will be about desire. Christie would have started for me. Personally, I think I've been very impressed with Christie this season.
Same with me, yeah.
There's obviously been a lot of speculation, Jim, around his future. We've mentioned it just now. He'll be talking to his pals, Stuart Armstrong and Kieran Tierney, who are on massive wages down south. That does rub off on players. As you say, they're just humans like you and I, and they're looking for the next big move. But I think Ryan Christie's performances this season have been criticised by some fans in relation to playing for himself, for example. And I think that was brought up the other day. And, I had my notes in front of me from the second half of the Sarajevo game, where Ryan Christie was involved in everything positive that Celtic did. And I think that, he gives the ball away. Yes, he takes risks. But the flip side of that, Jim, is that he does make things happen for Celtic.
Well, he's the guy I would have in the team every single time. I think one of the things, one of the maybe not so good things this season so far is we've not been playing that well in games. We've been dominating games, but we're not that good to watch, and it's a bit slow, a bit ponderous. Apart from Ryan Christie, because he's a up and at him dynamic player. I mean, he's a bit more dynamism in the team, and that's what was great about last Sunday when they returned the Lee. Because I'm a huge fan of Lee Griffiths. He'd be the first name in my team, because what Lee gave you last week that we haven't had all season is movement. And it was one for 15 minutes or something, and X number of touches and that, and so many shots inside the box and all this kind of stuff. He's a pest. He keeps that defence moving. He goes left, he goes right, he goes down the centre. He's a fantastic player. He'd be the first name in my seat for next week as well. He's not match fit. Again, Lenny will know the answer to the questions, but if you can get 60 minutes out of Lee Griffiths next Saturday against the bad guys, then you throw him in, because he will torment that team.
Yeah.
And even, again, show my ignorance here, if Eddie's keeping himself fit and he's up for it, I would start with the two of them and get 60 minutes with him. Another great thing about this season, which is a kind of unintended consequence, is the 5 subs thing. And that's right up our street. Because if you think about a normal kind of game, if you're not winning the game, you're looking to change either your forwards or your attacking midfield players. You tend to leave your kind of back 4 or your back 3 alone, or your goalkeeper alone. So basically, you could change all your attacking options. You could play virtually 2 different attacking teams.
Yeah.
It's not working 60 minutes putting them on. So football's all about opinions, and I'm sure people listening or watching will disagree. But I would certainly start with Lee and Eddie next week. And if we get 60 minutes out of them both, then a Yeti if he's fit, and Polish Paddy comes on for the last half an hour.
Polish Paddy, indeed.
That's how I'd play it.
Yeah.
I'd like the new guy to play, but it depends on all the factors that we just said earlier. And I think fans are too quick taking a get on players' backs. You mentioned the Ferencváros game there, and I was annoyed again. Maybe I spent too much time on social media looking at Twitter. But when the team was announced that night, Twitter was meltdown. No forwards. What's all this about? Get Lenny to F, sack Lenny, all this kind of stuff. I mean, actually, when I looked at the team, again, just down to opinions, I thought, that's the team I'd have played. Because Eddie was injured. And the reason Eddie was injured is he got kicked up and down the park at Tannadice the previous Saturday. And that's another thing that's out with the control that you can talk about as a standard of refereeing this season without sounding paranoid. If the players at Tannadice, if the guy up against Eddie had been booked in the first 5 minutes, he wouldn't have kicked him again. Eddie would have been fit. Eddie would have played against Ferencváros. Chances are would have won. Chances are fine margins. So Eddie's injured. Lee's in that game he was a million miles away from playing. Ayeti wasn't match fit, and we've seen how Lenny and the backroom staff have tried to manage him to the extent that he gets a start a couple of weeks ago and he's off a hamstring injury. So these are the things that we don't know about. So you're not going to play a Yeti from the start. So what's your choices? Who you left? You left with Paddy, Polish Paddy. And I felt sorry for him last season, because if the season had finished, we'd have won the league with a few games to go, and he'd have got his chance last year, because I've seen what he'd done. Whereas at the Ferencváros game, in terms of playing real games, he'd made a couple of cameo appearances in the last 10 minutes. He looked good and he scored a goal, but this was a Champions League qualifier. And you want all your big players playing. And people say, well, play Christie, play Charm, play all these guys. And you can actually put them all that night, because Christie's done the job at centre forward before. So that's the team he plays. And I thought that's the right team to play. What happened on the night? First 15 minutes was kind of eeksy-peeksy. We lose a goal because we couldn't defend a corner properly. That's not the centre forward's fault. That was just bad defending. And from memory, from 15 minutes to about 90 minutes, total domination of the game. Had over 20 shots a goal. The guy you put at centre forward scores the goal. And then one lapse of concentration with the big guy at the back, and we give away a daft goal. So it was hugely disappointing. But the reaction, ridiculous overreaction. So Lenny's getting in the net. Our captain's getting in the net as well. Scott Brown, unbelievable. I mean, again, this is opinions, and I'm sure a lot of your audience are not big fans of Scott Brown. But Scott Brown's a brilliant player. I mean, in fact, when he first came, I didn't think he was a brilliant player. 13 years ago, I thought we'd signed the wrong guy. I thought we'd went for Kevin Thompson, because Kevin Thompson to me he looked more like a Celtic player in terms of, he looked like a kind of combination of Alan Thompson and Tommy Burns sort of thing, good left foot, keeps the game going sort of thing. And Scott Brown I didn't really see. And for the first couple of seasons, I couldn't see it. But obviously, I think he had a lot of personal problems. Again, things that we don't know about, that are going on in people's heads. And then he's made captain by Tony Mowbray, which, looking back on it, was quite an inspired thing for Mowbray to do. He didn't do much, Mowbray, but he made Scott Brown captain, and all of a sudden he scores a goal at Ibrox, and the legend of Bruni is born. But to have played a number of games, did you say what he's played 580
odd games now? Yeah.
And the current day, in the modern day, is just ridiculous. The amount of punishment these players must get. I play fives, and every week I'm dead sore. Okay, I'm older, stuff like that, but people kick you, it's sore. And imagine, playing 580 odd games. In fact, I mean, in the midfield, in the engine room,
combative midfielder,
going in, getting kicked all over the park. Maybe does a fair bit of kicking himself at times, but 580 games in the modern environment is nothing short, for the one club, it's nothing short of astonishing. Yeah.
How long do you think he can go, Jim?
I think he'll go next season.
He's 35.
As well. I think next season. I think obviously we'll maybe sign David Turnbull with a view to maybe him fitting into Brunello. He's a different kind of player. And I think they want to keep him on the coaching staff as well, because I think it's the influence he has off the pitch.
Yeah.
And we hear interviews with other players, they always talk about him. No matter who they are, no matter if it's a kind of local lad or it's somebody from, far-flung part of the world, they talk about Bruni and what a great captain he is and what a great leader he is. And he helps them to settle and all that kind of stuff. So that's the stuff that we don't see. We don't see that. And we saw it last Sunday where he came on, and once he came on, you can see they all maybe gave an extra 5%, an extra 10%.
Oh, definitely.
And then Lee Griffiths, the goal he scored last week was a fantastic goal. I coached kids for about 20 years or so, and if you're ever saying to somebody, here's how you head, this is how you score a goal with your head. Just everything was perfect. His movement, how he got up for the ball. I mean, he's like a good what was I going to say? He's like somebody who's a few moves ahead, basically. And when he was leaping for that, he's thinking, it's going in that corner, a foot through the post, and I'm heading it down. And all over it comes, and his neck goes back really far, textbook header down, just inside the post. The keeper just kind of stood there. There's nothing to do. And I think that will change the season last week. There's a prediction. I think that will change the season. Lee coming back will change the season. Because again, opinions was that people talked about last season and said, the 3-5-2, that's what changed the season. Yeah, it did, but not for me. It was Lee Griffiths changed the season. Because I played 3-5-2 last year with Eddie and Bio. Never have been as good. Eddie and Polish Paddy. Eddie and Ryan. Eddie and somebody. Right. But Lee Griffiths is such a clever player. And you can see that Eddie likes playing when he's got Lee Griffiths alongside him. And because of his movement, he's creating space for other people. And they're giving them options. And that's why I think we just kicked on last year. As soon as he came back, and the goals he scores, whether it's a tap in for 6 yards or one for 25 yards or pinger, he's taking corners, he's taking free kicks. I think if we can keep Lee fit, physically, mentally, because obviously he's had some issues, you keep him fit, you start him every game, because he's the spark. And I think it'd be good to start him next week. And I think if we do that, we'll win the game no bother next week.
He is the spark, and they call him Sparky, don't
Sparky,
they?
Yeah.
Paddy Hutchison. Christie has been a driving force in the team as of late. He'll be a bigger miss than Eddie. Well, to be fair, I think I've probably called his praises quite a bit this season. Jim, I'm a massive Christie fan. I'm a massive Griffiths fan. Listen, if you wear a Celtic jersey, I'll support you, no matter what. But there are other players who you have an affinity with. And I remember going back to last season when Griffiths came back, and every time he stood up just to get, a wee run around the park or whatever, get warmed up, Jim, you could feel it around the stadium that the Celtic fans were willing him to do well. So when he eventually came back at the weekend, he's proven a lot of doubters wrong again, isn't he?
We've only got to the last game of last season, 5-0 St Mirren, he gets a hat-trick. And he was on fire that day. And he would have went on and scored another bundle of goals if he managed to play all the games. So I think he's a key player. I think if you play Eddie, Eddie's obviously a massive talent. You don't get to play for that French under-23 team unless you're good, and he'll have a fantastic future. He's maybe not playing so well at the moment, and part of that, I think, he's on his own up front. And if you've got 2 or 3 defenders, and they're allowed to kick you up and down the park, so if I was Eddie and I'm up there and people are kicking me all the time and I'm not getting a lot of service and there's not a lot of movement, then I'm going to struggle. And Eddie isn't somebody who kind of runs about daft. Eddie's give him it feet, give the ball to Eddie's feet, and he's got magic feet, and he'll do something. But if he's got 2 big guys running about kicking him up and down the park the whole game, you're not going to get a lot from him. I think it's only been the one game, maybe the Hamilton game, where he showed, this is me, I can do this. Since then, it's maybe a wee dip in form, but he'll come back because he's such a talent. And again, I still want to be kept him.
I know.
Given some of the things you're saying, because he's mixing with the French under-23 team.
Yeah.
And they'll be on even sillier money than some of the guys you mentioned before. So, again, I think it's just astonishing we've managed to keep all these players, sign the guys that we've signed. Brilliant.
No, it has been. And, the big thing that's always going to be missing this season, unfortunately, Jim, is us being there. We've, for example, last season, we're thinking, how are you going to celebrate that? It's difficult. And this season's going to be the exact same. But the priority, obviously, is to ensure everybody's safety. And we get that. But there needs to be, like you say, some kind of plan. It's almost as if I always refer back to Wallace and Gromit, where the dog is on the train and he's laying the track as we go along. I feel like that's what we are doing this season. We don't know what's in the corner, and we're just feverishly trying to figure it out as we go along. Some great points coming in from last night's international games. Helen McCallum, welcome back to the show, Helen. You're saying that a couple of positive coronavirus tests in the Republic of Ireland camp. Hope Shane Duffy isn't next. And follower Celtic, who regularly gets involved in the bulletins. Afternoon, PJ and Jim. Wasn't McGregor, Beaton and El Hamid good last night? I thought they were great.
Well, what was interesting, the fact they put the big guy at left back.
I know.
And you
He's
thought,
so adaptable, Jim.
But then,
so
you thought, well, maybe we didn't have to sign a new guy. Maybe we could have put the big man at left back, because I think he's a really good player, El Hamad. When he played at Ibrox in the 2-0 game last year, it was his first or second game. It was pretty early on. For a big guy, he's got really good feet. He can beat a player, and he obviously laid on the cross last week. So big fan of El Hamid. As I said earlier, Callum McGregor's just a brilliant player. Another thing is, as you mentioned earlier, if you're Callum McGregor, you know that if you wanted to, you could multiply your salary by a big number playing this Razzmatazz league. Mm-hmm. But he's still here, which is great. And
he never makes any kind of drama. No, absolutely. No. He gets on with that. I said it quite a few times last season as well about McGregor. His level of consistency sometimes means that his level of performance is taken for granted. So if someone else performed like that, they're man of the match, but Callum McGregor does it week in, week out. So it's almost as if you expect it from him.
Aye. And you'd also, if you're looking at it from an objective point of view, once we do the 10, then that's been achieved. What happens next? So if you're maybe thinking, I'll just stay for the 10 and then I'll go in, then those players will go with their best wishes because they've achieved the 10. So it'll be interesting after this season, no matter what happens this season, whether we get the 10 or if we don't get the 10, what kind of interest will be then? Because going for 11 is not, it doesn't have the cachet of we're going for 10. Unless we get the trebles going, unless we do the quadruple treble, then for number 5 trebles means and then 6 trebles. So I think the club needs something to hook something on, after this season. Otherwise, I think there might be a big drop off. And also, getting back to money again, people, it's very expensive to watch football. The fact that we've paid out all this money to watch the game in the telly, there's all these dodgy feeds you can watch games on, but Celtic fans have stepped up, as have the fans across the city in Aberdeen, have stepped up and bought a ridiculous number of season tickets, knowing virtually that they'll not get to watch any football. So what happens next year? I don't think I'll do the same thing again. I don't think people will be paying that kind of money. If the big pivotal season's over, good or bad, once that's over, I can't see 50,000 Celtic fans paying for a virtual season ticket next year. If we've done the 10 or not done the 10, I just can't see it, unless there's some sort of hook in there.
I think, again, looking at the situation last season and this season, Jim, the future is so up in air at the moment with regards to what's going to happen. Is the season going to finish? Even if it does finish, what is Scottish football going to look like when we get back to playing? That's where we start begging the question, where will Celtic be playing their football? Should they play down in England? A lot of people will scoff at that right off the bat and say that's not going to be possible. Some other fans look at the English game and say, well, I don't want Celtic to become part of that. There's other possibilities in the future. I just think there's going to be so many things that in a year's time we'll look back on this and it wouldn't have seemed possible. But the circumstances around the coronavirus and the casualties, and I don't just mean individual but businesses, will really be the driving force as to where Celtic end up.
Well, that'll come back to money, as it always does. Everything must come back to money. And whether Celtic would be invited to join some sort of English or UK league, you looked upon the kind of Skies of this world or the BTs of the world, they'd be the driving force behind making something like that happen. Said to you before coming on air, I'd love some sort of European league, some sort of proper European league where we go in Division 3 or Division 4 or something like that, and you get relegation and you go up the leagues and you go down the leagues, because I'd much rather we were playing teams of a kind of level standing. And as I said earlier, by any metric you want to use, we're the biggest club in this country. So, if you're playing Ross County, you're playing Livingston or Hamilton, then these teams have got hardly any money at all. So I'd rather from a spectacle point of view be playing teams of the kind of same level. And I find that, and maybe again it's a kind of getting older thing, is that when you were maybe younger and maybe going back to the 80s there, where it was more competitive, you didn't know we were going to win games. If we played Aberdeen at home, if we can win today, it'd be a big thing. Whereas just now, if we don't beat Aberdeen at home, that's a disaster. So there's too much at stake, and it's the old cliche, every point's a prisoner type thing. So a lot of the time, you don't enjoy the games, you endure the games until you get 3 goals ahead. And then you go into the enjoyment section. You can sit back and say, I'm actually enjoying this now, let's get some more goals. But until you get that 3 goals ahead, and the game, I think I said last time was on, the Hamilton game last year was a point in case. Freezing cold December night, sitting shivering, with 1 goal up, we're not playing particularly well, and you know they're going to score, and then they score in the 90th minute. And you think, and then Bruni pops up and wins the game, and everyone thinks the world is great again. The Livingston game this season, another point in case. When Albi, as they call him, makes it 3-1, you're thinking, right, go on now, let's get a few more goals now. And it doesn't happen, and the big guy hits one from 30 yards. All of a sudden, the endurance factor goes up like by factor of 10. And the guy missed the one in the last few seconds of the game. I mean, it was easy to score that. And all of a sudden, they'd drop 2 points and be crisis time again. So it's an endurance. I found watching the games far more stressful this season than it was last. Last season was quite stressful watching the games. This season, it's even more stressful because you need to win the games. And imagine what Lenny feels like.
I know. Because
basically, you win the 10, he's an absolute legend. He won't be a legend for like the next few weeks, next months. It'll be forever. And if I go back to my play, just to bend the brat back, there's a comment one of the characters makes about, should Rangers make 10 in a row, they'll not be ripping the pish for a few weeks or a few months, it'll be all fucking eternity. And that's what this is like. So the mindset we had back in 97, 98, hoping that they didn't do the 10, across the city, that's what they're thinking just now. They can't do the 10.
It's unthinkable.
It's unthinkable from their point of view. Unthinkable from their point of view, because Lisbon Lions were the guys who done the 9. They can't beat the Lisbon Lions record. So whatever I'm thinking, the stresses that I think, multiply it by a big number. That's Lenny. And that's why I think we need to support him, encourage him. By all means, if he makes mistakes, maybe I wouldn't have done that, maybe fine. But don't go over the top. Get behind him, get behind the players. This is the season. And I think it starts a week on Saturday. And it starts because hopefully Lee Griffiths is on the park making it happen.
And that would be brilliant. To see him return at the weekend there was fantastic. And, you know, like yourself, he's not going to be 100% fit. You know, I totally get that. But because of what he brings to the team, I think it would be something that I would consider would be to play Griffiths. And I did, when I predicted the lineup yesterday, I did predict that. That's ever changing, obviously, with the current situation. Some great points coming through. But before we're able to look at any of the others, you mentioned bend it like brat back. People tuning in to a Celtic State of Mind may be aware that you have been involved for a few years now, Jim, in writing plays, but that has developed and there is a new project underway. And we've spoken to someone who is going to star in your next show. Tell us all about Bend It Like Bertie.
Bend It Like Bertie is a follow-up to Bend It Like Bratback. The kind of feedback we got from that play was just astonishing. We ended up putting it on the SEC. So it starts off as some wee daft play that I'm writing, and all of a sudden you're on the SEC and you're getting to meet ex-Celtic players, which is phenomenal. So Bend It Like Bertie takes place January 65 to April 65. It's the Scottish Cup run. It's just when Bertie comes back and Jock Stein comes back, and Des McLean's going to be in. Des McLean's an incredibly funny guy. So it's on next May, because I'm hoping that when we get to next May we're back to some sort of normality, and it's on the Cup final weekend, so it's on the Friday the 7th, 8th and 9th of May at Webster's. So I'll be putting something on social media at some point soon to do with that. We met Bertie a couple of months ago. Imagine meeting Bertie Auld. Imagine sitting down and chatting to Bertie Auld, because as the song goes, everyone loves Bertie. And it was brilliant just to kind of sit, as we're sitting just now across with Bertie Auld, and chatting to him for the best part of about an hour and a half. Socially distanced, of course, and hearing these stories and stuff like that. And basically, the meeting was about just telling them there's this play on called Bend It Like Bertie, and Des was there as well. And Des will be playing Bertie Auld, and there's a fantastic Bertie Auld impersonation. So that's kind of coming soon. That'll be the next Celtic play.
Well, the thing with that is, after speaking to you a few months back when we were at Cathkin Park and we put the podcast out, you told me your plans. You also put me in touch with Des, and we were able to speak to Des during the lockdown. And he gave us some examples of what he can do, but he also spoke a bit about the next play. And as you say, I've had the great pleasure of speaking to Bertie Auld myself on one occasion, and he doesn't disappoint, does he? You've got this image in your mind, you've got this impression of what Bertie Auld will be like. You were showing me some fantastic images of him when he played, and you think back to this guy and everything about him back then, though, Jim. You know, the brill-creamed hair, the way that they dressed, eventually when he became a manager with a cigar. I had this image in my mind of what Bertie was like, and when I spoke to him, you know, he lived up to that. He was absolutely superb, and he spoke so fondly of his time at Celtic, of course, but also of Neely Mockin, who he had played with. You know, if it hadn't been for Neely, Bertie Auld would have played in the 7-1 game. That's astonishing. Yeah. And then 10 years later, he's winning the European Cup for Celtic. Yeah. And, you know, you just cherish all these men, don't you? All the remaining Lions. And I think that when we finally get out of this, when we finally do get through this, and we will get through it, Jim, being able to go with fellow Celtic fans to the game, absolutely looking forward to that. But getting together for something like this in May would be fantastic as well. Was it May next year?
So on May 7th, 8th and 9th. Cup finals on the 8th. So hopefully we're at Cup final as well on that day. So that's, here's hoping.
Absolutely.
But Bertie was just, to sit in his presence for 90 minutes. And until I started writing these plays, I never envisaged that you would end up going to the SEC with these things. And I've met all these ex-Celtic players. And I'm somebody who never actually met ex-players, but all of a sudden I've got ex-Celtic players' phone numbers in my phone contact, and I show off to my pals. Look at this. That's Murdo McLeod.
Just don't lose your phone.
That's Murdo McLeod. That is. He's a pal. There's Joe Miller. He's a pal. So here's Paul John Dykes. He's not a pal.
No, I thought I was.
He's a colleague. He's a colleague. So said it there about the image of Bertie Auld and the hair and the dress sense and all that sort of stuff. When you do go back and you look at stuff in the 60s, and it's fascinating, and some of the stuff that leaps out the page at you, if you tend to, within the play, it goes through sort of January 65 to April 65, so you're looking at the games we played during that period, and the home games were getting 10,000 people, 12,000 people. That was the attendances, because it was like 12 years, I think it was, since we last won the league, 11 years since we last won the cup. So it's similar to kind of bender like Bratback, because Bratback was about at the season we stopped to 10, because it was like 9 years since we won the league. So it's a similar period, but where it's different from bender like Bratback is that in 97-98, Celtic had been a big team. They had won the European Cup. Mm-hmm. They were known throughout the world. They're a big team, they've had success. Whereas in 1965, Celtic, they're not that much better than Hibs or Aberdeen or Kilmarnock. You know, they've never done anything significant. It's been 12 years since they've won the league. So it's a similar type of period where you're looking at something whereby we haven't won anything in ages. You know, and there's a great quote, and I've also met John Fallon. There you go, another name dropper, who's a big fan of the play, big fan of Ben like Bratback. And I read John Fallon's book, and he had a brilliant phrase in it when he talked about when Jock Stein came in and they finally won the cup in 65. He said, "We no longer had a slave mentality." Such a brilliant phrase, mm-hmm. You know, compared to the team across the city. We had a slave mentality. And I'm not saying, maybe that's not the right thing to say in these current times, but seeing yourself as, you know, the underdog and not being able to kind of achieve what you'd like to achieve, even though you're good enough to achieve that, but always coming second, mm-hmm. That must be the mindset of the bad guys at the moment. There's a game coming up next week. They'll be wary of coming to Celtic Park because they know this is the big game. They know this is it. And whether they have that kind of mentality, chances are they do. But Celtic, certainly in 1965, that's the mentality they had because of what was happening across the city. Mm-hmm. Other teams winning the league. That maybe wasn't as bad as in 1965. It wasn't like the bad guys were going for 10 in a row because like Hearts won the league that season. Sorry, Kilmarnock won the league that season. They beat Hearts in goal average. Dundee had won that pre-season. Teams like, you know, not that long before that, East Fife were a big team. Stuff like this, you know. And people, younger people, you know, don't get that. So one of the things that came out of Ben like Bratback, there's a number of people who came up to me and said, I took my 19-year-old son, he couldn't understand this. What's this, Rangers going for 10 in a row? What's that about? Couldn't understand why Celtic were so bad, so poor. So it's a bit of a history lesson for that kind of age group. Not for guys like yourselves who obviously lived through the 97, 98, but you didn't live through 1965, neither did I. So when Ben like Bertie comes, you know, there's going to be bits of that you're thinking, I didn't know that. Mm-hmm. Some of the smaller details within that. And one of the things I do is, between each scene, you'll get a kind of catch up. So I'll play a video and there'll be a song of that within that 4-month period, and it will show the scores since the last game, just to keep you up to date with what's actually happening. And then this time I've put the size of the crowds on it. So you've got, you know, Celtic Clyde 10,500, mm-hmm. and that was January the 2nd. Because back in the day, here's another wee lesson for your audience. Back in the day, when they got to New Year's, you played 2 games in 2 days. Right? So they played the Rangers game on New Year's Day, lost 1-0. Bobby Murdoch missed a penalty in the last 10 minutes. Jimmy Johnson got sent off in the first half. Surprise, surprise. And then they played Clyde the next day at Celtic Park and drew 1 each at Clyde in front of a crowd of 10,500 or something. And then even other games in that period, the home games, poor crowds. Nothing more than about 20, apart from the cup. They fancied to come out for the cup. And maybe back then the cup was a bigger thing. And we spoke before as when we were talking English football, and I was just talking about the fact that back in the 50s and 60s, the FA Cup was much bigger than the league down there. Mm-hmm. But in terms of that, bender like Bertie, it's a bit of a history lesson for people like me, people like you. But there'll be guys who obviously lived through that. And one of the things I was keen to do was speak to people who were there. And my big idea for the play was, I'm going to have it all on a supporters bus. It's just on a supporters bus. They're going to the game, they're coming back for the game, and they're talking about the games and other things in life type thing. But I then felt that was too restrictive to do that. But then I thought, well, I'll make my main character a supporters bus convener. And then I thought I need to find somebody who was a supporters bus convener in 1965. And fortuitously, the Bertie Auld CSE from Maryhill and Declan McConville, who's regular contributor to Celtic State of Mind, he knew somebody who was the convener of the Shakespeare bus that ran out of Raybury Street in Maryhill back in the 60s. And what a lovely man this guy is, Jim Divers. I went to see him, and he had all this detailed information about what life was like in 1965, going to Aberdeen, where his mum would make up pieces and he would sell them on the bus. Stuff like that. Didn't have motorways back there. So going to Aberdeen was maybe having to have an overnight stay and all this kind of stuff. And stuff that we take for granted these days. And I was thinking about the other day I was chatting to somebody about the fact that when I'm at the game, I feel I have some sort of influence over the game. I know it's bonkers, but I'm there because Eddie's there. And I say, "Well, on, Eddie, get your finger at your ass, give it to..." Now, obviously Eddie doesn't hear me, but I think I'm influencing the game in some way. And if I can't go to the games, I can't influence the games. I watch you on the telly, and you still shout at the telly, obviously. But Eddie can't hear you, but you still do it. So you've got these bits, you need to be at the game. You can't be at the game watching the telly, listen to the radio. That's just torture. That's just a nightmare. Or you get text updates and stuff these days. And then back in the day, you had the video printer. You're too young for that.
Yeah, no, I remember that.
Video printer.
Yep.
The thing typed out. And then you had the guy doing the classifieds, and you could tell by the tone of his voice. So it's like, Aberdeen 2, they've won. Aberdeen 2, well, they've lost. Things. So you back through the years and think of all this kind of stuff. So I miss being at the game so I can shout nonsense. And because I know I'm 150 yards away, but it doesn't matter. I'm influencing the game. And football fans are incredibly superstitious. So they've got all these routines or rituals you would do going to the game you no longer do. What's yours, Paul? What's your question?
My ritual.
Your superstition going to the game?
I never ever wear a Celtic top. Never ever wear a Celtic top to the games. Never have done.
So what do you do? What things do you do? I do this. Drink in the same pub, you wear the same socks, that kind of stuff.
No, you see, this is the thing. Although I'm superstitious, and I am superstitious in many, many ways, there's not a process that I would go through. My superstition would always be that I don't. And if I did turn up to a Celtic game wearing a Celtic top, I would believe that we were going to get beat because it's gone on so long.
So don't do it then. Right,
so I won't do it. Right. In terms of drinking in a pub, I don't go drinking on match day. So I normally drive because I'm travelling to the game. From outside of Glasgow. So
there's no lucky socks?
There's no lucky socks or underwear or anything like that. No colours. No colours.
No colours?
No colours.
Right, okay.
No.
And you find that's worked?
It has worked, and that's why I can't change it. I cannot change that because it would drive me wild.
So when you watch the game in the house, do you sit in the same chair?
No.
No. It's quite controversial.
No, I don't. I mean...
You don't have a lucky chair?
I don't, because if I do that, I would go insane. I'm that superstitious, so I can't get into that.
So no lucky chair?
No.
Okay.
Nothing like that.
And when you sit in the chair, do you sit in a certain way? Do you put your legs, your right leg over your left?
I don't even think about that.
No, I do.
I don't even think about that.
I actually put my right leg over my left knee. That's it. I have to sit this way.
You're taking that to extremes, that
you have to,
superstition.
It's such a big season. And it's at the margins. And these things make a difference. In my head, they make a difference, and that's the most important thing.
The thing is, what you said about the game, that resonates with me, that you think by being there you can influence the game. And I don't mean in an Uri Geller kind of way, like you make the ball bend and hit the post. I don't mean like that. But Celtic fans collectively can influence a game. They definitely can, Jim.
Absolutely. And I think, especially games where it's tight, 10 minutes to go, and they've seen over the years, and you think about the game at Rugby Park, was it 2 seasons ago now? I'm trying to think Scott Brown's. Number of late goals where you think, someone that was down to the fans actually cheering them on. And that's what it's different this year. And that's why it was so great getting those late goals last week. Because having the fans there last week would have made a difference. But yeah, I certainly influence the game when I'm there. I know that. And I made a point, I think, in the first play I wrote, one of the characters says something like that. And he felt bad because he felt that he could control the defence better. So if the defence were too far away, that wasn't good for us. If the goalkeeper was out in front of him, then he felt more confident because I can control the defence. But that second half, they were miles away. How can I control the defence if they're miles away from me? And that's the thing that everyone shouts at football, and it's bonkers. Somebody's going to a football match for the first time, and that's what my plays are about. You can have somebody looking at somebody at a football match for the first time, and what they do, you stand up and shout. Mm-hmm. Nobody can hear you. Get it to you're a clown and this kind of stuff. So why do you shout? Do you do it for yourself? Is it just a natural impact? Is it superstition? Is it so? you know, and all the kind of rituals that you go through, and all the singing that you do, and all that kind of stuff. And it's just madness. But you miss the madness, and that's the thing.
That's the outlet, Jim. That
the outlet,
it allows us to get to that level. Now, it's been absolutely fascinating, Jim, and hopefully you're able to come in on a regular basis to the studio and join me for a Celtic State of Mind's bulletin over the next few weeks and months as we move into the unknown. But there's been loads of comments coming through, and I will go through as many as I possibly can tomorrow morning and during the rest of today. But all that's left for me to say today, Jim, is thank you very much for joining me once again on A Celtic State of Mind.
Thanks, Paul.